President Bola Tinubu has described the ongoing insecurity in Nigeria, particularly in the northwest region, as a result of inherited security compromises. He attributed the banditry and insurgency to historical injustices suffered by conflict victims. Speaking at a two-day security and peace summit organized by the Northwest Governors Forum and United Nations Development Program, Vice President Shettima representing Tinubu, noting that addressing the nation's security challenges requires tackling historical injustices, reversing institutional weaknesses, and countering the ideological mischief affecting peace and security. Joining us to discuss this further is Senior Researcher and Project Coordinator, Institute for Security Studies, Dr. Ndubisi Christianani. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to the program.
All right. Now, based on the President's address, we can see that the three major issues being highlighted that are regarded as the foundation of Nigeria's insecurity issues, they're being stated there. But talk to us, first of all, is this excuse enough that the current insecurity challenges that we have, he says, are inherited insecurity problems?
Yeah, no, I think he's very right on this, that it's inherited. If you look at it from his administration point of view, that is just 1 year plus now. So when you look at it from that perspective, yes, it is inherited, but then not to forget that he is part of governance for a long time, throughout the process of these insecurities developing. So he's part of governance, and he also attributes himself as being the one who brought Buhari to power. So it's very important to see that, so a lot of these insecurities that we are facing now also emerged during President Buhari's era, especially the issues of banditry, which metamorphosed from the farmer header crisis and also the terrorist incidents. So he's right on that aspect, but then I see that, it's also an excuse trying to say, okay, give us some time, we're going to address some of the threats.
Yeah, I mean, we keep talking about time, and we've spoken about time many, many times. The president, of course, in his speech also pointed out the weakness of our judiciary, weakness of our security agencies, and a couple of other things are some of the reasons why this might be difficult. But I mean, you can tell when a government is serious about addressing issues. So from what you've seen, do you see any concerted effort by the current administration to, even in the most little form, address some of these issues that would then, lead to an improved security situation in the near future?
Yeah, so I think that's a very important question you asked. That yes, he can have the excuses and say, okay, he's not part of the causes of all its inherited issues, but then what is in place currently, to address some of the threats? Now, when we look at what is happening in the country, we look at some of the. Let me use the example of Okwama, for instance, in the Niger Delta area, where civilians were killed after some military officers were reportedly killed in that area. And then there's this rampant attack on civilians that happened. Those are how insecurities develop. Over time, the children of those who have been afflicted, they see the Nigerian state as a problem. They see the country as being inimical to their progress. Then they join different security outfits, whether it's illicit or illicit, for them to carry out their attacks. So, when you begin to ask, so are you going back to the same scripts that have caused some of these insecurities? And then we also look at, what steps has it taken, for instance, engaging communities in the places where these attacks have been happening? For instance,
but hold on, Mr. Ani. So we're also not, maybe misdirecting blame here. The president, obviously, is popularly known that he can't be everywhere at the same time. He's not going to be in Sokoto and be in Benue State and also be in Edo State all at the same time. There are persons that have been left in charge of these, these areas. There are people whose responsibility it is. So would it be safe to redirect our blame and our pressure to these people, to the Inspector General of Police, to commissioners of police across the country, to heads of security agencies across the country and say that they're the ones who have failed Nigerians, because they're the ones who request a budget every year. I believe that, money from the 2024 budget is, sent to these agencies. And so can we blame them instead? Or do we constantly, of course, hit blame on Mr. President without focusing on these ones?
No, as in, we have to blame the president, as in he's the chief, he's the person in charge. And your disposition and your body posture to engage in your ministers, to engage in the people the Inspector General of Police, the army chiefs, and all that contributes to the level of their action. When you're not being tough on them and then also demanding greater accountability, there's no way we can, absolve you of the blame. As in, it's like saying you appointed, you send someone that the person is not efficient, and then you send them and you're not following up on the level of their accountability and, following up on a regular basis to what extent that they're operating. So there is a lot of issues around that. And then we're also talking about, some key infrastructures that the government should have made in the first place, such as investing in satellite imagery, and important drones. We can talk about the corruption within the armed forces. We can talk about corruption within the police forces, but then yet the buck stops with you. Are you investigating enough to see whether the funds that have been allocated for such useful technologies are being used? So in many ways, yes, the culpability also goes to the Inspector General of Police and then the army chiefs and all that. But then he has a key responsibility making sure he puts them in check, because those are his appointees. And then when we look at it, it's also a larger developmental problem. Security is not just about the insecurity, about armies on the street, or let's say the police also going around looking for bandits. What programs have we put for victim support? So those are critical areas.
All right. There are so many things that have been highlighted, that the President highlighted in his speech. Of course, sharing that banditry has cast a dark shadow on, Nigeria, and saying that if we have to win this war, there's going to be a lot of focus on the Northwest. We have a lot of things that are currently distracting us right now, or maybe in some measure fueling a lot of the insecurity challenges that we have. But we have poverty. Do you think that at this point, where we are right now, that the fight against poverty, against, or the need to ensure that the average Nigerian has access to even a 1 square or 2 square meal, has in some way trumped the fight against insecurity? How can we find a balance between the two? Do you see that happening?
And it's always together, things that are joined together. That the fight against insecurity against poverty is critical for the fight against insecurity. On the one hand. So what we see, for instance, in places in the Northwest is that there's an increasing resort to drugs, and that resort to drugs is not just because people want to take drugs, but it's also for stress management out of issues relating to responsibilities and poverty, and underdevelopment, lack of jobs and hopelessness in some of those areas. So we begin to see that, poverty is critical to understanding insecurity. Not to say that poor people go to become causes for insecurity, but then to also understand that it is an enabler. It is something that leads people to that. When we look at how people take drugs and how drugs are enabling people and motivating people to engage in criminal activities, it's something that is there, that we need to look at. When we look at the inflation rate right now in Nigeria, it has gone so high. When we look at the poverty rate and the multidimensional poverty assessment by the Statistics Bureau, you see that it's at an alarming rate. And salaries have not gone up. People's pay have also not gone up. So to what extent do you want people to survive in that instance?
Yeah.
So there has to be concerted effort, to address poverty. Otherwise, we will continue to see that happening. And when we are talking about poverty, it also means that in rural communities and in some border communities, those places are left out. State presence is not there. I think one of the colleagues was also mentioning about how non-state actors are now governing some areas. So when you have those incidences, insecurity then is justified as a way that communities and affected people feel like they are now taking back governance in their hands by every means.
It's a really sad situation here. From what a lot of people can see, it doesn't seem like much will be different. It seems like we're back at business as usual. There's not been any change in the way that things are being done. There's not been any change in the body language of the presidency or the executive. There's not been any change in the budgeting, for security either. There's not been any redirection of funds with security. So almost nothing is different. So, I don't think anybody's expecting that the results would be different either. But we'll see. Christianani, thank you very much for stopping by. Looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.